Let's begin this edition of India First by getting you all the updates that have come in the last 24 hours as the deadly conflict between Israel and Iran spirals. Both sides firing a volley of missiles. Here are those updates. Iran fired a barrage of ballistic missiles, one which directly hit Soroka Medical College in Beersheba, the largest hospital in southern Israel. The missile caused extensive damage to the hospital's old surgical wing. Iran strikes also hit a school building in central Israel where vehicles were damaged. Rescue teams, paramedics were seen evacuating people trapped inside buildings. Iranian missiles also struck the Ramat Gan area of Tel Aviv. The missiles landed near the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange building. At least 25 casualties were feared in the fatal strike. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, meanwhile launched another wave of attacks in Tehran, targeting nuclear weapons projects and missile production sites. 60 Air Force fighter jets completed a wave of attacks on more than 20 military targets in Tehran. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has warned that strikes on Israel will not go unanswered. The Israeli Prime Minister did not also rule out the elimination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and said during a visit to Soroka that all options are open. So US President Donald Trump has repeatedly indicated that he would punish Iran. The time for ceasefire is over. There's only unconditional surrender, as he puts it. He reportedly convened the Situation Room officials in the White House. His Doomsday Plane has been brought to Washington, D.C. So many hints that America could enter the West Asia war. But I refer to one particular development today, the movement of the Doomsday Plane. What exactly is the significance of the movement of this plane? Let me explain to you what the Doomsday Plane is. It's a nickname, essentially, for the U.S. Air Force's E-4B Night Watch. It's currently deployed near Washington, D.C., close to President Trump at an undisclosed location for obvious security reasons. Now, an airborne command center designed to ensure the president and senior military leaders can maintain control of U.S. nuclear forces in the event of a catastrophic conflict is possible with this plane, including nuclear war. So this plane, essentially, the Doomsday Plane, can withstand nuclear blasts, electromagnetic pulses as well, essentially built to withstand shock waves and also at the same time maintain communications in the aftermath of a nuclear detonation, which is why this plane is so crucial to the arsenal of the White House as well. This plane also is capable of staying airborne for days with aerial refueling 24/7. It can stay airborne. The last time it was used, the A4B was in fact used during 9/11. It was airborne to provide continuity of government, essentially, because that was a time when you had the president constantly needing to keep touch with all officials. So the movement of this plane, along with all of the claims by Trump, has set off tongues wagging with endless speculation on what could happen next. Take a look at this report first.
A hospital in Israel's capital, Tel Aviv, hit by an Iranian missile. Tehran claims the hospital is a military site. Israel has vowed revenge. As missile strikes and counter-strikes continue, all eyes are on one man. The President of the United States, who has so far kept the world guessing about his next move.
We have the best weapons in the world, by far. Nobody close. And certain countries take advantage of that. Israel has incredible weaponry. So we'll see what happens. I've been asked about it by everybody, but I haven't made a decision.
Donald Trump has reiterated that Iran will not be allowed to have nuclear weapons.
Well, I don't want to get involved either, but I've been saying for 20 years, maybe longer, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I've been saying it for a long time. And I think they were a few weeks away from having one. Too much devastation. And they'd use it. I believe they'd use it. Others won't use it.
All signs are pointing to one direction. Trump seems to be leaning towards an intervention, whether direct or indirect is yet to be seen. The Doomsday Plane, a US Air Force E-4B night watch aircraft, has landed near Washington, D.C. US media is reporting that Trump has told his aides that he has approved attack on Iran. US military deployment in Middle East has also been bolstered big time. Iran says all options are on the table if US gets involved. Iran's deputy foreign minister issued a statement saying that if America wants to actively intervene, Iran will have to use its tool to teach the aggressors a lesson. He also advised America to remain a mere observer. Will West Asia theatre of war expand? China and Russia have come out in support of Tehran. Will US still enter the war? Bureau Report, India Today.
So we've got a couple of scenarios also lined up for you. What happens if America takes that step? And it's an if right now because there's no clarity on what Trump will do. But if America enters this fight militarily, chooses to strike Iran, what could that look like? We break that down for you. First of all, the plan, of course, and we've spoken about this repeatedly on India Today, is that the US will immediately ensure that its B-2 stealth bombers are dropped. Why is this a game changer? Essentially, Israel is counting on US stepping in just because of these bunker buster bombs, because it can help in targeting the Fordo nuke site. Fordo is one of the most fortified nuke sites in the world, completely underground. And so Israel's current arsenal can't touch this particular nuclear site. They're reliant on US bringing in their bunker busters to actually do that. So if US steps in, they're going to go ahead and use that. Every US president has held back on this operation so far. But you never can quite say with Trump, can you? Now the risks involved here is, if for America actually stepping into this battle, is that the B-2 bombers are shot down. It's a relatively predictable move that if America steps in, these bombers are brought in. So what if Iran is fully prepared? Now, the other question is whether these bunker busters can actually go ahead and dent the Fordo nuke site. Do they have the power, the capability to actually strike that deep? There have been some suggestions that, look, it will take a few of these bombers at least to go ahead and ensure that there is a dent on the Fordo nuke site. So is that actually possible? That is something America will be looking into, because if they're taking a risk, they'll be looking at all possible permutations and combinations. Now let's talk about the aftermath. If America steps in militarily, Iran hits US bases in the Gulf and Mediterranean. And Iran has not shied away from warning about taking these steps as well. US has multiple bases in the Middle East too, and they could be potential targets for Iran. You could see American troops, therefore, losing their lives, or even civilians for that matter. There are thousands of personnel who are deployed in these bases in the Middle East, very close to Iran. So that's a serious threat for America, which is why there have been some voices saying we should be pro-peace, not stepping into every war. There has been voices of that coming in domestically from America. US then gets dragged into another regime change conflict. This is something that Trump has spoken of, Netanyahu has spoken of, about targeting Khamenei. So be very clear that that's something that's on the table right now, regime change in Iran. US has a long history of doing that, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so many more that come to mind. And so this will be another one where they're essentially thrown into the mix. Iran could also retaliate. Retaliate how? By going ahead and resorting to regional terrorism, by resorting to cyber attacks. They could also go ahead and take strong action like missile strikes. They could go ahead and conduct missile strikes on oil tankers in the Persian Gulf that could seriously cripple America. So Iran too has options. It's not like, they're going to be completely sitting back and watching if America steps in. They will be taking all of these steps, and the worry for America will be whether they have a plan if any of this plays out, which is what perhaps is being discussed right now in the top circles in America. Okay, let me bring in right now a panelist joining us here on India First. We're joined by Michel Plitnik, political analyst and president of Rethinking Foreign Policy. He's joining us live from Maryland in America. Also with us is Jane Kinnan-Mont, CEO of the United Nations Association from London, UK. Jane will be with us in just a bit. Dr. Kinvraj Jangid, Director and Professor, Center for Israel Studies at the O.P. Jindal Global University is joining us from Tel Aviv. Sandeep Unitin, our senior journalist who's been getting us all the latest updates, decoding and analyzing the updates that come in from Iran and Israel, is with me here in the studio. Thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us here on India Today, on India First. I'd like to begin with Mr. Plitnik. It's very difficult right now to guess what's exactly playing in Trump's mind. But ultimately, to you, sir, what factors will it come down to for the White House?
Well, you're certainly right, and that's not just by accident or just by fault of character. Trump is very intentionally putting out contradictory messages, contradictory tones, so that people won't know what he's going to do. But it's also very clear that his military staff and his lead diplomatic staff have come together and have approved a plan of attack. Now, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to happen. They have the plan lined up, and it requires the president to say, yes, we're going to move forward. And that's the question, is whether or not he's going to do that. I think he's largely going to consider a few factors. One of them is domestic. The question of him entering this war has split his own base in a way that's never happened on any issue before. There has been one or two people who've questioned this or that part of his policy, but his base is really split over this question of going to war with Iran. Some of his previously most vocal supporters are coming out against it. So he needs to consider that. He also needs to consider whether or not this is going to be a decision that brings America into another long drawn out Middle East war. Okay. If the United States is intending not just to join, but to join in Israel's goal, which certainly seems to be regime change, then that is a long-term commitment. That will be another long-term war. That's not going to happen in a week or two. And it certainly is not going to happen, as Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, by taking out the Supreme Leader. That's not going to change really much of anything. The Supreme Leader is 86 years old. There's a very clear plan in place for his succession. He could die at any time, even aside from this war, being an 86-year-old man. So they're ready for that. This is not Iraq under Saddam or Libya under Gaddafi, where you take out the head guy and the government falls. That's not what's going to happen here. So he needs to consider that as well. And finally, he needs to consider, or he will consider, because this is what's important to him, he's going to weigh whether this feels to him like something that if he doesn't get involved, he's going to be seen as standing impotently on the sidelines. Or if he does get involved, is this going to be seen as a grave mistake, and Trump has led us into a disaster? Those are the two concerns on either side that will weigh his decision. He will want to come out of this seeming like he has jumped on something that was, yes, Israel already started, but that he was a key piece of, and he wants to be able to come out of this with credit for its, presumably in his mind, success.
We've already been seeing that, Trump trying to claim credit in many circumstances, including what's been happening between India and Pakistan. But let me also bring in Jane Kinnan-Monto on this broadcast. What do you make of what has happened so far? And particularly, I want to focus on one issue. We spoke of factors that Trump will look into. I also want to understand from you what lessons really from past US military interventions in the Middle East could play out in Trump's mind when he takes a decision on what's happening today.
Well, we know that Donald Trump was elected as a politician who had been extremely critical of US intervention around the world, and in particular of the Iraq war. So many of his supporters are now very, very surprised to see him considering this strike on Iran. But it seems that he is mainly keen not to have a long-term entanglement involving US boots on the ground. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he will not join in this war with what he may see as a short-lived intervention, such as a bunker-busting bomb dropped on Fordow. But of course, we all know from wars elsewhere that it often seems like wars are going to be quick and easy, and countries can get much more entangled than they expect, especially if Israel is pushing for a regime change in Iran.
It is going to be a long-fought one. There's no doubt about that. We've seen already the kind of impact that's happened whenever there's a conflict in West Asia, in the Middle East. But Dr. Jangid, you're joining us from Tel Aviv right now. I think the question that everyone's also asking right now, looking at Trump's options of what he possibly could do, is how reliant Israel is right now and counting on America really stepping into this conflict militarily.
Thank you. I think Israel has been capable of doing a limited, but it's still a large-scale military damage to to Iran. I think the only consideration that Netanyahu has, and that's the military establishment's consideration as well, is what already has been talked about, the Fordo site. To take down that site, it is still a very difficult task for Israel. What can happen as a way out for Trump is that Israel already asked in a funny way, can they lease out the bomb to us? And the joke in Tel Aviv was that, well, they will have to lease out some men or women from America to fly the aircraft and then do the whole job for you. So I think Israel is trying to really get this bomb in their hands. I do think that Netanyahu is right now tempted to make it a regime change, but I don't really think Israeli military is going to really sustain that out in domestic scene. Israeli domestic population is right now less panic because there have not been many casualties and many missiles have been unsuccessful in causing a large scale panic at the mass level. But people are really getting scared. Just today, outside of Tel Aviv, 2 kilometers away, there was a large-scale bombing. And the bombing that happened at the hospital, thankfully, was out of the capital. It was in the city called Beersheba. And none of the people got hurt. Only one person got wounded because the hospital staff was so alert that they put everybody in the shelter.
Okay, so less panic right now, but Sandeep, I'd like to bring you in on this. You've been doing an analysis of essentially the missile arsenal of Israel versus Iran. Ideal situation, of course, for Israel is if America steps into this conflict, but is it a game changer for them? That if America chooses to say, look, we'll only diplomatically step in and stop there, we're not going to be involved militarily, will that be essentially a game changer in this conflict for Israel in a bad way?
Absolutely, Akshita. And when I was in Israel a few months back, this was the one question we asked all the scholars, the military people that we spoke with. What is the end game for Israel in this conflict? And everyone said it is regime change in Tehran. And the next question is that does Israel have the capacity or the capability to effect regime change on their own? They said, no, we cannot do it without the United States. So now the Operation Rising Lion, you have to see whether it was planned with the United States active participation or it was an operation that Benjamin Netanyahu launched by himself, figuring that it was inevitable at some point the United States would have to intervene in Israel's favor and, of course, use those GBU-57s to take out Fordo because, the only way the United States is going to enter this conflict, Akshita, and all our panelists have spoken about the pressures on Donald Trump and his MAGA base, which is completely split down the middle about the US possibly getting into another black hole of, another Middle Eastern quagmire like Iraq or Afghanistan. They do not want to get into one of those unwinnable wars. Donald Trump wants a war where he can enter and exit with a mission accomplished bumper sticker saying that, look, Israel was fighting this forever war with Iran and the United States entered with its bunker busters and we have the best weapons in the world. And in 48 hours, we had ended Iran's nuclear weapons program. He wants something like that, something that will give him bragging rights for his 6 months, which he has, frankly, Akshita, he doesn't have anything to show for the last 6 months. He's promised to end all the conflicts in the world. No one's listening to him. All the conflicts are raging. In fact, the theaters of conflict are expanding, as we've seen with Israel and Iran. So Donald Trump wants a quick win. He wants a mission accomplished banner, if I can use that George Bush banner from 2003 and exit. But, things never go to plan. And we've seen this happening so often in the past, with Afghanistan in 2001, with Iraq in 2003. So that is the reason that, Donald Trump's base doesn't want him to, lose focus. Because, the focus for the United States and for Donald Trump is they are the most hawkish when it comes to China, possibly since the Korean War 70, 80 years back. The main enemy, according to them, is China. And any other conflict like Iraq or Iran, for that matter, distracts from the main goal, which is to contain the rise of China militarily and economically.
On the issue that you mentioned of domestic air and the messaging involved, Mitchell, I'd like to bring you in on that. You said that was one of the biggest factors, the domestic reaction if America enters into this war. It's also contradictory to Trump's messaging. He's been talking of how he's had a role in so many ceasefires, in ending conflicts, ending wars. So it doesn't really augur well for that messaging if he's then going to, step right into a conflict.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's messaging has never been all that strongly connected to reality, and for a great part of his base, that doesn't really matter. They accept what he says, and facts be damned. That being said, this is a big one, and this is one where he has tried to portray himself as a peacemaker. He very much wants to be seen that way, but he doesn't want to act that way. The process that the United States and Iran was engaged in to avoid this very war was working. There were talks happening. There were agreements. They were moving forward. It was not happening fast enough for Trump, and he had to deal with the fact that Israel, according to his intelligence, was at the point where they were going to strike Iran with or without the United States' support. When he heard that, I think it changed his calculus, but it also betrays how weak a position he has put the United States in, because Israel, up until now, would never have taken such a step without the United States at least acquiescence, if not outright support. They wanted to attack Iran many times over the years, and American presidents, be it Barack Obama or Joe Biden, and even Trump at times, said no. When push came to shove and the Israelis decided that they're going to do it whether he likes it or not, so presumably we can get him then to come and support us once we actually do it, that's pushing Trump in a way that other presidents have not been vulnerable to. And if that's what is perceived by his base, it's going to be a severe blow to him. And I think it's going to be important that people, if that is indeed what happened, that people hear about it.
No, but how do you also, and Jane, if I could bring you in on this, how does the US also ensure that if they choose to enter this conflict, they do it by sending across a message of being responsible, of responsibly entering this conflict? Look, there are comparisons. While there can't be, there can also be between what happened in Iraq and now, of course, in Iran. And the reason I say that is because at that time, the big buzzword was weapons of mass destruction. Now it's about nuclear weapons. So do you think there's a comparison there? And in such a circumstance, can the US actually send out a message that we're acting responsibly?
Yes, I'm very worried about this. I mean, we know that more than 2 decades after that invasion of Iraq, we're still feeling the impact of the disinformation around WMD and the distrust that has created. Now, again, we're looking at a war that will have all sorts of long-term implications, but one of those implications that will matter in the future is the impact that it has on the international community and what is left of the so-called rules-based order, international law, multilateralism. At the end of the day, this has been a unilateral attack by Israel. The world is now hanging on the social media posts of one very powerful man, and the multilateral system is in complete disarray. And this really matters for things like whether other countries will get nuclear bombs in future, because we need to protect the non-proliferation treaty, which Iran is a signatory to, and ensure that there are peaceful ways to ensure nuclear non-proliferation.
And that's what it comes down to essentially, Dr. Janged, while there's all of this talk of why the conflict, why the strike that Israel has been putting out repeatedly, it will also come down to one moot question about whether there's enough evidence for this kind of a conflict, for this kind of a war really in West Asia against Iran.
I would personally say when it comes to Iran and America, a country like India or being an Indian, I tend to support the Iranian autonomy. Look, the way India became nuclear, going against American sanctions, going against what Indians call nuclear apartheid. It's true, NPT was a very unfair system, very hypocritical system of the West, where they didn't want to abolish any of their nuclear weapons and they put veto on the future ones.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, America is just making that about that power equation in the Middle East that Iran shouldn't get it. India did it. The problem with Iran, and this is where Iran is different than India, is that Iran went on this ideological messianic war with Israel and America. Khomeini declared America as a great Satan, but Israel was directly threatened by Shia revolution from 1979. And many times, in fact, I'll give you an example. In 2017, in a square in Tehran, they put out a doomsday clock. And Khomeini himself made this prediction in 2017 that this doomsday clock is a countdown. By 2040, there would be nothing left of Israel and the Jews in the Middle East. That's sort of a very hostile negation of the people and a nation state has really given Israel a foot of legitimacy to attack. But America doesn't have a legitimacy to attack Iran in a way. None of the American interests, none of the American issues have been threatened by Iran except their power fights in the Middle East. So I think America's involvement would really endanger many things. And it would also invite a lot of troubles from China because China is unusually keeping quiet so far. But
Do you
one
think
shouldn't
that means
forget
that,
China
are you
has a
trying to
strategic
suggest that
advantage.
if America steps in, it then escalates into a global conflict, a global war?
It doesn't get into a global war. We understand that there isn't going to be a third war like we often tend to think about. But it would mean that the world will be much more divided on this issue. Think of India. Think of China. Think of
Yeah.
Russia. Russia is not in a position to influence anything right now. But I'm sure China will have a great leverage then to make this war a dragging war for America. As many people have said before, it would be very difficult for Trump to predict an exit out of it. Right now, he can stand
Yeah.
on the side and let Israel deal with it. And Israel does have still some legitimacy to continue this fight as far as the nuclearization is concerned. When they will openly get into the regime change, how do you replace it? Would you bring Raja Pahlavi from US, the prince of the exiled, ex-monarch, back to Iran and put him back? How do you put a regime in place? Look, they did it in Afghanistan, nothing happened. Look, they did it in Iraq, nothing of that sort succeeded. So, how does America think taking down Khomeini and bringing in another set of people will stabilize Iran for anything? So,
Yeah.
I think it's a complete mess that American involvement will bring in to the Middle East.
We've seen that previously too, but my takeaway from this conversation, Mitchell, so far is that it seems there are more cons really to pros for Trump if he chooses for America to really step into this conflict. But domestically, I also want to understand from you, what's really the sense, the mood on the reasoning being put forth by America on why they could consider stepping into this militarily?
Domestically, there really is not support for stepping into this war. The Washington Post just did a poll, and only 25% of respondents said they supported the United States getting involved at all in this war. I think we also have to remember this entire war is based on a fiction. the fiction that Iran was pursuing a nuclear weapon. United States intelligence assessment has been and remains since 2007 that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon. They did enrich uranium to a much higher degree in the past. That was because of the sanctions that are on them, and they needed something to bargain with. So all of this is based on, now most Americans aren't really thinking about that point, but most Americans are thinking that they don't want to be involved in this war. And I think that ultimately could be a big deterrent, but we've seen around the world that people are against this war and governments are still moving to support it. In many places, particularly in Europe as well, it's the same sentiment. And there's no real indication that popular sentiment is going to be the impediment. It can be part of it, but I doubt it's going to be the impediment to Trump getting into this war, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. Interesting perspectives, this. And look, I started off this discussion saying that it's impossible really to guess which way Trump will react. None of us can ever predict how Trump will react, what he'll do next. But at this point, clearly all cards are on the table. Thank you very much to all of our panelists for joining us on this broadcast. I want to bring in now on India First. We've got with us Yair Lapid, Israel leader of opposition, former prime minister in Israel as well. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Lapid, for joining us here on India Today. I want to understand first from you as leader of opposition, do you agree with what Netanyahu has done with the strike on Iran?
Probably the first thing we have agreed upon in the last decade. But this was necessary. We had no other choice. It's not that Israel has declared war on Iran. Iran has declared war on Israel decades ago, financing and pushing forward terror like Hezbollah and Hamas, standing behind the October 7th massacre, and now trying to develop a nuclear bomb with the intention of dropping it on Israel. So we had to go out there and make sure this doesn't happen. So on this matter, the Israelis stand united and in total agreement.
I understand why that you all speak in one voice today, right now. But Mr. Lapid, I want to speak about what's happened in the last 24 hours and the strike that's been reported on an Israeli hospital. The cost of conflict always falls upon the civilians. And unfortunately, we've seen that happening in Israel too. Hospitals have been targeted. You know, you've got other civilian structures being targeted, Mr. Lapid. Is that a cost that Israel is willing to pay right now in the course of this conflict, unfortunately?
Fortunately, yes. Nobody wanted this war. And listen, we have no conflict with the Iranian people. We don't have a border with Iran. We don't have a history of conflict with Iran. The only problem is the only reason we are disputing with the Iranians is because the Iranian regime want all the Jews to die, and we refuse to die. So yes, the cost of war is always horrible, and I'm sorry for any innocent loss of life, of course, in Israel, but also on the other side. We don't have a fight or a war with the Iranian people. We just have a war with a regime that wants to eliminate us. There are only one member state in the United Nations, which is Iran, that is openly calling for the total destruction of another member state, which is Israel. And if they will get their hands on an atomic bomb, they will use it against us. So yes, we are paying a dear price. And what happened today in the Soroka hospital down south is heartbreaking. But the people of Israel understand that this is a price we're willing to pay in order to get rid of an existential threat.
Just taking off from what you said, Mr. Lapid, I also want to understand from you your response, since you agree with Mr. Netanyahu's decision of launching Operation Rising Lion, is why now? That question is constantly asked, of whether this strike by Israel was completely unprovoked on Iran and whether there's adequate evidence that nuclear weapons are in fact being developed by Iran.
Well, I think there's no secret that there are nuclear facilities in places like Natanz and Fordo, and that they have now enough enriched uranium for not one or two or three, but 7, 8, or 9 bombs, and that the centrifuges are from the most advanced generation. and that they have revived the weapon group in order to be able to weaponize their missiles, and that their ballistic missile operation has grown into sizes that are non-bearable for us. There are more. I mean, if Iran would be stopped today, they would have had more ballistic missiles than Russia, and this means that they have more missiles than we have interceptors, and this cannot be allowed. So again, we didn't want this war with Iran. We don't have a fight with the people of Iran. I wish them well. We are not willing to have a nuclear Iran, and the level of intelligence and the kind of intelligence we were holding was very, very clear. Iran is running forward for a bomb, deceiving, lying to the entire world. If you ask the people who are supposed to supervise the Iranian nuclear program, they already know that they've been lied to for years now, and we had no choice. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it.
You say you have no choice. Is this also, if this conflict continues in this manner where it's escalating every 24 hours, Mr. Lapid, do you think that this could perhaps take a nuclear turn, at least on Israel's part?
No, this will never take a nuclear turn from Israel's part. We are, unlike others, responsible people, and there's no reason to worry. This is not going to turn into a global war. This is not going to turn into a nuclear war. This is what it is. It's an operation meant to make sure that Iran doesn't gets a hand on a nuclear bomb or nuclear ability, and this is it.
If there's constant escalation from Iran, there's been a lot of talk right now, Mr. Lapid, of America stepping in, of America's intervention to help you, to help Israel. And there have been a lot of comments by the US president on this. What's your message to America, Mr. Lapid? Why do you think America should step into a fight which many believe is not America's fight?
Well, it is the world's fight. This is not an Israeli problem. It's a global problem. Nuclear Iran is a global threat. Not to mention the fact that this will throw the entire Middle East and then the world into a nuclear arms race. If Iran gets a handle on a bomb, then you're going to have Egypt and Turkey are going to be the first ones to want a bomb as well. The Saudis will want to have their own nuclear program. You're going to have a nuclear arms race as bad as the Cold War back in the 70s and 80s, and you don't want this. And therefore, since it's a global problem, the United States has to do with it, and it will threaten the United States. Think of it this way. If the Iranians will have a nuclear ability, it is not only a bomb on a ballistic missile. This is also the ability of any terrorist on earth to get his hands on a dirty bomb or what they call a dirty suitcase that will go abroad, and then you have, instead of one 9/11, 20 9/11s everywhere else. So yes, this is a global problem, and we've been telling our American friends we think they would be better off stepping up to the challenge and making sure that the facilities in Fordow that only they can really hit right now are eliminated from the face of the earth in the name of global security.
And do you think they're convinced, Mr. Lapid? Do you think America and Mr. Trump will go ahead and help Israel right now in this conflict?
Well, Mr. Trump is going to make his own mind, and I'm sure he's going to do what he thinks is best for the United States. We can only say what we think and put out the evidence to why is it that we think this is essential. But eventually, the President of the United States is making his own decisions.
Okay, Mr. Lapid, also, I want to understand from you what really is the end game here. Is the ultimate goal of Israel to ensure a regime change, or as many hints have been dropped about the elimination of Khamenei?
No, what we want is to make sure Iran will never go nuclear. Eventually, there will going to be some sort of a policy following the military act, and it will be negotiated. Interestingly enough, for you, maybe I was asked yesterday on Israeli television, who do I think should be the mediator among others? And I said, I think one of the best people for the job, or maybe the best person for the job, is my friend Jai Shankar, your foreign minister, because India is considered to be an honest broker by all parts. So I don't know how it's going to be played, but all we care about is making sure Iran will not have and nuclear ability.
Okay, India has condemned conflict, violence, but Mr. Lapid, you believe India should be playing the role of a mediator right now between Israel
I
and
think
Iran?
it can. I was asked who I think is smart enough and respected enough by both parties in order to be a mediator or a third party in a mediation to stop the conflict. And I just gave my honest opinion that India was always well respected here in Israel. I think the Israelis wouldn't want an Arab country. The Iranians wouldn't want a Western country, and India is the global superpower and somebody we all trust.
Well, on that, I agree with you, Mr. Lapid, that perhaps India is perfectly poised to step in, mediate if we need to, between Israel and Iran. Thank you very much, Mr. Lapid, for joining us here on India Today and telling us on why exactly Israel has taken this step of a conflict with Iran, of striking nuclear sites in Iran. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
We've been getting you all the latest updates on the Israel-Iran conflict. Let's talk about what could happen in the days to come. Mind you, we've been seeing with almost every single day an escalation in the conflict right now in West Asia. I have Sandeep with me who will be decoding for us what the escalation ladder in this conflict could look like. So Sandeep, take it away. I think we'll start with where things started first. What was the first step of escalation that's led to this point now?
Well, absolutely. Akshita, it was the 7th of October 2023 when Hamas attacked Israel, massacred civilians. 1,200 people were killed with utter brutality. Hostages were taken. Hundreds of them were taken prisoner, and they were taken into the Gaza Strip. And that is when Israel launched its massive ground assault of Gaza, in which tens of thousands of people have been killed. And of course, 50 hostages still remain unaccounted for.
So the first escalation, the first step that led to the escalation is what happened on October 7, 2023, where you had that attack, that brutal one by Hamas. The next step, let's talk about that as well, Sandeep, of what exactly happened. The next step in the escalation
The next
ladder.
step was when Iran activated its network of proxies. This is a network that it had created over several decades. You had the Hezbollah in Lebanon, you had the Hamas, of course, in the Gaza Strip, you had Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, and of course the Houthis in Yemen, 1,000 kilometers south of Israel. They launched attacks, missile attacks on Israel, and then Israel launched attacks to destroy all of these proxies, including Hezbollah, Hamas, and attack the Houthis.
And this was a time when you had multiple attacks, essentially. A multiple front opened up against Israel.
A ring of fire, as they called it.
The ring of fire,
yes.
And so you had Israel hitting back at every one of these sites. And then now, what's happened last week? Operation Rising Lion, escalation ladder, the third step.
So we are at stage 3 when Israel launched unprecedented attacks on Iran. Operation Rising Lion, 200 fighter jets launching attacks on something like 100 targets, killing Iranian nuclear scientists, leadership figures, attacking air bases, nuclear weapons sites, all of that. So that is where we were at just last week. And a week later, just a week later, you have stage 4, which is when Iran attacks Israel using hypersonic missiles.
This is the Fatah one that was used by Iran.
We're not very sure which one was used, but it was one of the 3, the Fatah one, the Sejil, or the Khorram Shahar 3, which is IRBM's intermediate range ballistic missiles, which enter the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds of over 10 Mach, between 10 and 15 times the speed of sound. And that is what was possibly used to attack the hospital there. So we are at another scale of escalation. We've climbed one step up the ladder from just 1 week.
In a matter of 1 week, you've seen essentially an unprecedented escalation. And that's what's got everyone worried about what could come next. This is, of course, Iran using hypersonic missiles. And while Israel has the much talked about Iron Dome, there have been missiles that have been able to permeate through and hit their targets. But let's talk about what happens next. And while we've broken down what's happened in the escalation ladder so far, the next few steps are essentially possibilities of how this could escalate further, Sandeep?
Absolutely. And this is the one big question that we are looking at. Will the United States enter the conflict on Israel's behalf? And if they do, what would they attack? And that one possibility is that the United States launches B-2 and B-52 bombers to strike at nuclear sites like Fordo, which are believed to be 90 meters underground. It's one of the world's most heavily protected and defended nuclear sites. It's a uranium enrichment facility. And if the United States enters that, it will have to destroy that for Israel, because that is the ultimate step to denuclearize Iran, as Israel and the United States want.
And that's what Israel is counting on. They've been pushing hard for US to step in because they don't have the kind of arsenal needed to target the Fordo nuke site, which is why they're counting on US stepping in. But if that happens, unprecedented escalation. This could then see an escalation beyond what anyone imagined, that this would be war, essentially.
It would be all-out war, because then Iran will have to retaliate. And if Iran chooses to retaliate, it's not going to attack the United States. It is going to attack all the US bases in West Asia. Now, the US has 8 permanent bases in West Asia, places like Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, Iraq, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia,
Thousands
UAE.
of personnel,
There are 50,000 American servicemen over there. Some of those bases, we are told, have already been emptied out, but Iran would choose to attack all of those bases to signal the fact that it would want to teach the United States a lesson, as they've been threatening. And of course, it could activate its proxies as well. Hezbollah could launch attacks on the United States. There was that truck bombing that Hezbollah carried out in the early 80s, where over 250 Marines, US Marines, were killed in Lebanon. It's one of the largest such suicide attacks, largest loss, single-day loss of US personnel. That was carried out by Hezbollah. Iran could activate them to carry out strikes on Hezbollah, carry out strikes on US interests. So that is in the realm of possibility, given the kind of non-state actors, this ring of non-state actors that Iran has cultivated over the years.
And you could see that in regional terror, as Sandeep pointed out. It could be cyber terror, also cyber attacks that Iran could kick off. But what that will also mean is intensified attacks from America. It won't stop there, Sandeep.
Well, then the Americans get involved in a conflict, exactly what they're worried about. This is again in the realm of possibility that the United States then would have to retaliate to Iranian attacks and proxy attacks. Then they would have to go all out to attack Iranian bases, infrastructure, literally move up the ladder from just targeting that one nuclear site to knocking out all of the Iran's military capabilities, ensuring that it's not just denuclearized Iran, but it is demilitarized as well. So that would be a very big step up the escalation ladder.
If there is retaliation from Iran, if America steps in, that's when you're going to see essentially a vicious cycle of strikes and counter-strikes, because stage 4 of the escalation ladder, stage 8 of the escalation ladder, and this is all, and if you see things move to this level, is essentially Iran shutting off the Strait of Hormuz. And that could be a big step also against America, against many countries.
It could be, basically, the Straits of Hormuz are very critical. It's where more than 50% of the world's energy supplies flow through. And Iran has signaled that in the past that it would shut the Straits of Hormuz if it was directly threatened with attacks of this nature. And given the fact that Iran is literally fighting with its back to the wall now, it is in the realm of possibility. It's one of these options. I'd like to remind our viewers that these are all possible alternatives. None of this actually happened. This is what we fear could actually happen if the conflict spirals out of control. And there, Iran could actually strike and shut down the Straits of Hormuz.
Worst case scenario, essentially, if you see US stepping in, it will be non-stop attacks, and Iran isn't going to sit quiet. They're going to try to hit back hard. But the worry here, Sandeep, is at what point will this to you, or if it will at all, turn nuclear?
Well, Iran does not have a nuclear weapon yet, but as our panelists on the show have mentioned, that it is within the realm of possibility that they could use a dirty bomb, an RDD, a radiological dispersal device, to attack the United States, targets bases around West Asia, possibly even Israel. And that is where things get really, really, nasty, where they go up the nuclear exchange ladder, and things go completely out of control, and that would lead to catastrophic consequences for Iran, because that is when the nuclear lines are going to be crossed, and Israel will have no option but to retaliate with nuclear weapons.
So if America get together and launch nuclear strikes on Iran, what you're looking at essentially then is a global conflict.
It is quite possible. We don't know for sure, but given the way things have panned out in the last couple of months, it was almost improbable to think the kind of attacks that Israel launched on Iran. It is well within the realm of possibility that more countries could enter this war either actively or as passive supporters.
Like China, like
yes,
Russia.
China, Russia, if things go really, really south and they see Iran collapsing, it's an important ally for the Russian Federation. That is when these two countries could enter to stop further annihilation of the Iranian regime.
And all of this escalation happening if America actually goes ahead and takes military steps against Iran, which is why we're hoping that it doesn't come to that, because this is the worst case scenario that we've played out for you, where it could even turn nuclear. You could have other countries also stepping into this effectively, that it could turn into a global conflict. Thanks very much, Sandeep, for decoding that for us and joining us with your analysis. That's all we have time for in this edition of India First. Thanks very much for tuning in.